Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, why not? Hi everyone, my name is Ido Flatow. This strange accent is because I come to you from Israel, from a company called Seller Group. I'm a Microsoft MVP for IIS and ASP.NET. And among other things, I wrote a bunch of courses for Microsoft, the official WCF course, the official Web Services and Azure course, also a couple of books about .NET and single-page application development. I like to write stuff whenever my wife lets me, because it takes a lot of time. And other than that, I also manage the Israeli web user group. So if you by any chance come to Israel during the third week of the month on Tuesday, you're more than welcome to join our user group. It will be in Hebrew, so I may have to give you a translator, but other than that, you should have fun. Okay. Yaniv?
Yes, so my name is Yaniv Rodenski, and just like Ido, I come from Sela in Israel, and I'm a Windows Azure MVP. I'm also an author. I wrote the Windows Azure course with Ido, and I'm currently about to finish my book debut on a Couchbase server. So if you guys are into NoSQL, we're hoping it will turn out great. I also manage a user group, the Windows Azure user group in Israel, but for the past year I've been transitioning back, or past 2 years, transitioning back from doing cloud-oriented things more towards the big data NoSQL space. Web development in JavaScript is still a big passion for me, so I'm doing Node.js as much as I can. So now we've introduced ourselves, let's introduce the frameworks. Round one. So first of all, I want to ask you, how many of you ever developed in Node.js, ever tried Node.js? Okay.
So let me ask the same, how many have been developing in ASP.NET? Oh, I win, we can go wrong.
No pressure.
The question is, by the end of the day, how many people will shift?
We'll see. I'll try to be convincing. Okay, so do you want to introduce ASP.NET?
Yeah, but I think all the people here already know ASP.NET, so let's be brief about it. ASP.NET, age of 13, 14 if you count .NET 1.0, but no one cares about that version. If you're familiar with ASP.NET, the base installation is about 150 megabyte. The base CLR assemblies, when you upload a new application into the memory, it's about 6 to 7 megabytes, so it's not that much. Of course, you can't use only the CLR when you're using ASP.NET, so by the time you upload all your assemblies into the memory, entity framework, system web, and all the other stuff, a basic ASP.NET weighs about, how much? 60, 70 megabyte, right? Something like that. We have a bunch of styles for developing in ASP.NET. We have the original ASP.NET web forms. We have MVC, something that's called dynamic data that I don't think anyone is using today, other than Microsoft for demos. There's also a single page application framework called Web Pages. And of course, we have Signaler, Web API, and some other cool stuff. Of course, ASP.NET is from Microsoft, originally from the .NET framework, but today ASP.NET is basically open source, or should I be more specific and say source open? Since the source is open, you can view it. I don't know how many people are actually contributing to ASP.NET and they are not Microsoft employees. I mean, anyone here contributing to ASP.NET? Yeah, we don't have time for that, right?
Actually, I heard it on the first year they had 2 contributions.
Oh, 2?
2.
2 people or just 2 fixes?
Probably 2 commits.
Yeah.
But they weren't that specific.
Yeah.
Okay, so Node.js in the right corner. Node.js is quite new. It's been around for around 5 years, and it is pretty lightweight. We're talking about 6 megs. But when you run a full MVC application, it goes between 30 and 40 megs. It's lighter than ASP.NET, and it remains light for a long time as far as I've seen an application in production. So this is one of the nice attributes about it. We're going to talk about it later on. Styles of development, as we will see, Node.js is very flexible. You can, I'm tempted to walk away from you, but Node.js is very flexible.
You have
styles like MVC and MVR, which we are going to see.
Okay.
You Microsoft guys. Okay, but you can adapt any style of coding that you like. What else do we want to say about it? It's open source. It started as a pet project by a guy called Ryan Dahl, and it was a very interesting project because anyone knows in which language Node.js started in? No one? C. It started as a C framework, and after a while no one used it, so he decided to look for a managed environment and ended up with using JavaScript. And that's the story of Node.js. Ryan Dahl works for a company called Joyent. They're a cloud provider, very interesting cloud provider, I must say. And they're backing Node.js. But in addition, other companies are backing Node.js. Nodejitsu is backing, or was backing Node.js. There was a big fight over this for the past few months. Microsoft is backing Node.js. In fact, I personally know teams, one team in Microsoft that are working solely on maintaining Node.js and writing code for Node.js, making sure that Node.js runs correctly on Windows, making sure that Node.js interacts correctly with Microsoft products like SQL Server, and Microsoft are really committed to that. And if we are talking about open source effort from Microsoft, I think that Node.js represents that better than ASP. Continue. Okay, so let's talk about the strengths of Node.js. Node.js, as I told you, is very lightweight. Now, in this day and age when every one of us has a powerful computer in his pants somewhere, it doesn't seem like a very important attribute. But if you consider running in the cloud, where you pay for every compute resource that you consume, Node.js can become very efficient in that. And for some applications, specifically IO-bound application, Node.js excels with doing a lot with very few resources. So it's a very important attribute of Node.js. And it is built around the concept of asynchronous I/O. In fact, that C framework that Ryan Dahl built to begin with, and is still the base for Node.js, was an asynchronous API for C. That's what started Node.js. And of course, he had to adopt something else for developers because no one wants to write C code anymore. And
Not C or C++?
No, C.
So because I can do C++. C is not the question.
Okay. And asynchronous I/O is important. In fact, it is also important if you're doing ASP. And Ido is going to see some asynchronous ASP. But asynchronous I/O basically allows us to use better our compute resources, many threads. Okay, so a lot of the I/O work that we're doing is done on threads which are operated by the operating system. For example, all of you run on Windows. Anyone knows what I/O completion port is? IOCP? Just about. Okay, so Windows, for example, as an operating system, has dedicated threads to read data back from I/O devices. And in fact, you don't need the thread that started the call to write or read from a disk, from network card, to be waiting there. There's another thread dedicated, always running there, waiting for the answer. And Node.js and also ASP.NET know how to take advantage of that, so you can release your threads back and just get better use out of them. And before you think that saving on threads is not important, because we all learned that Flow is what's going on now. We all have multi-cores and we all need to parallel our work. I want you to consider what it means for the .NET framework, for example, to request a new thread. Anyone knows what the minimal memory consumption for a new thread in the .NET CLR? No one? 1 megabyte, roughly. And how long does it take for the .NET CLR to actually request a new thread from the operating system, because it needs to request that from the operating system?
Just stop for a second. Are you now talking about ASP.NET because I can go?
No, I'm talking about the importance of being asynchronous, because it's one of the most important attributes of Node.js. And the answer is that they estimate it as 1 second. And this is why when you're using .NET and the thread pool doesn't have a new thread to give you, it will wait for half a second before it will start to increase its thread counts. So saving on threads can be important and help you to scale. And asynchronous I/O both in Node.js and ASP.NET is important. It is cross-platform, which I think is great, and you can use it on almost any operating system, and it is based on JavaScript. You all knew that, right? Because the first lecture I ever gave on Node.js, half of the people were disappointed that it's just JavaScript and just walk out of the room. And I think that the last thing that I want to say about Node.js is that as an open source platform, it has the most vibrant community around it. And you can see a lot of libraries and tools and environments just growing around Node.js rapidly. It's been the most rapidly growing environment in the past year as far as open source environments go. And that's it. Do you want to talk about ASP.NET? These guys.
Yeah, they know ASP.NET, but I have one thing that can just beat all of your stuff. ASP.NET is C#. I win. Basically, who here likes JavaScript? Okay, that is not what I expected. I've actually been developing web applications, beginning with classical ASP and up until ASP.NET 4.5.1, and I still hate JavaScript. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
It is.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you. I told you that.
Yeah. But let's face it, ASP.NET is a very robust framework. We have ways to create web applications. We have ways to create web services. Okay, I'm not talking about the ASMX web services, which is a piece of you know what. I'm talking about web API, for example. We have the ability to use asynchronous operations because the basic concept in Windows, those IO completion ports, are also being used in ASP.NET development, in .NET development, whenever you use the async and await, okay? Or even if you use tasks. How many people here are using .NET 4.5 with async and await? That's great, right? I mean, instead of using the begin invoke and end invoke functions.
I want to say something. Even if you're not going to use Node.js ever, when you go back, start converting your ASP.NET code to be asynchronous. I'm serious. That's the one thing that you need to remember from this talk.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize what Yaniv said now. Yaniv mentioned before that it takes about half a second to create a new thread when you're using .NET. That's almost true. The concept of the thread pool in .NET, which is what ASP.NET is using, is that when you send a request to a service, to a server, ASP.NET will create a new thread to handle that request. Now, if you just started the server, there are no available threads. So ASP.NET needs to create a new thread for that from the thread pool. Now, the thread pool will not create a thread immediately. Okay, it will only create a thread immediately if it has a few threads. The number of threads that will actually check, it will only create threads if you have less threads than the number of cores in the machine. So on an 8-core machine, it will only create threads for the first 6 or 7 requests. I mean, think of it, you have the main thread, you have the GC thread already running, you don't have enough available threads. After that, after the first 6 requests, it will actually queue up the request to create a new thread, and the thread pool will dequeue those requests every 500 milliseconds. So if you have, like, I don't know, 50 concurrent requests because all the people came in the morning to the office, open the computer and press enter to open your application, it will take about 5 or 6 minutes until everyone gets the request answered. Okay, because they will just queue up and they will be handled sequentially. It doesn't mean that you can't fix that. Okay, if this was an advanced ASP.NET session, maybe I would show you how. Just a small tip: thread pool.set mean threads. Okay, that will fix your problem and will allow you to handle more concurrent requests at a single time. But basically, yeah, what Yaniv mentioned is true. If you use asynchronous calls in ASP.NET, if you want to call your database, use asynchronous Ido.NET. If you want to call other web services, call asynchronous HTTP calls. If you want to write to the file system, or to a network stream. Use asynchronous file I/O or network I/O. Okay? If you do that, you will be using the asynchronous I/O completion ports of Windows, and you will be able to release those managed threads back to the thread pool.
You know, they're here to escape the parallel programming session by Sasha. Let's talk about web development.
Okay, so basically, I win because it's C# and not JavaScript. But let's be frank. I mean, ASP.NET is 13 or 14 years old, depends how you look at it. We have plenty of tools. We have plenty of debuggers. We even have the ability to remote debug our servers. We have profilers. We have a lot of tools both to create, to manage, and to diagnose our applications. I think it's a very robust framework in comparison to Node, but I might be mistaken since I'm not a Node developer.
So let's see.
Okay. I'll let you start.
You let me start. Okay, so very few of you, 1 second, let me just try to. Excellent, thank you. Yeah. I know how to do this. Okay. Where can I connect?
That's part of it.
No. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so. So let's take a look at a very small Node.js application. I'm going to show you this file. This is just a JavaScript file. And there are very few lines of code, so let's go over them. Again, most of you said that you didn't use Node.js, so this is, how many of you are JavaScript developers? Okay, so fair enough. So the first line basically uses require.js to load a JavaScript model. Now this model deals with HTTP. And in JavaScript we had HTTP models for a long time now. We had the Ajax model for jQuery. In Angular you can use the HTTP model. And they're very useful because you can call HTTP services and HTTP based pages and just consume them. And this specific framework, this specific model does the same. You can do that with it. However, there's one thing that all those models can't do, and it's this line, create server. And what this does is actually creating an HTTP server object, which we can use to answer requests. We are listening on a port. This is one configuration that we're doing, and we are giving it a callback. This function is going to be executed for every request that is executed for that server. So let's run it. And
one quick question on this.
Yes.
So in theory, Node.js is going to replace ASP.NET plus IIS combination.
No. We're going to talk about hosting in a little bit. But actually, Node.js runs under IIS, and there's a good reason to do that if you're on Windows.
Right.
On non-Windows operating systems, yes, but you still need something to host it.
Right.
Okay. So let's run this file, and the way that we are going to execute it is simply by doing this. Node and the name of the file, and I need to do this as a super user. And now the node binary, in Windows that would be the node exe, just runs my script. You can see that it is still running because my server is here listening. And as far as my server is listening, waiting for request, the node process is going to run. And now I can do things like go into web browser and get my web page. And just a couple of words about what I'm doing here. So here I'm just getting the response object. This is just a response or a stream that I can write to the response. And I'm writing some things. I'm giving it HTTP header, status code, and some content. That's all I'm doing. And basically, out of the box, that's what Node.js brings you. It's a very bare bones framework, but you can create HTTP servers in JavaScript. Before you get the feeling that ASP gives you a lot more, I want you to remember that at its core, ASP.NET is just an HTTP module that does exactly that. Every request you send goes to an HTTP module, and that HTTP module can handle it itself, or bootstrap a whole framework like ASP.NET, and that's what ASP.NET does. So on top of that, we have frameworks that we can bootstrap. We don't need to go here and handle every request ourselves. We're going to see some more frameworks. And do we want to see?
Let me just show a bit of ASP.NET.
Okay.
So everyone know about ASP.NET. So, oh, by the way, since I'm in IIS MVP, I have to correct you. It's an HTTP filter, not a module. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so
It used to be an Isapi filter, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. Should remember that.
So I
Sorry,
won't
one
start.
question. How many of you are Isapi developers?
I can't raise my hand on that. So I won't show you a hello world. I will show you a demo application that we created for this session. And basically what this application shows is a demonstration of using the different technologies in ASP.NET. We're using MVC here. We're using Web API as a backend service layer. We're using stuff like SignalR for notifications, and a bunch of calls to a MongoDB database. Did I miss anything? No, security. So basically this is a small secret agent application that we created. If you know anyone at MA6 or MA5, we'll be happy if you can contact us so we can sell them the application.
We'll give them a decent price.
Yeah, discount. DevWeek discount. So let's go quick. Let me just zoom out. How do you? Yeah. So the application basically retrieves all the information from a Web API backend service, including the image, including the content. If I browse to different agents, I simply send through through jQuery. I forgot about that photo. Yeah, I'm simply sending GET requests through jQuery. If I want to update content, I'll send POST requests. I'm even able to send, as you can see here, I can send images as a submit to my backend server. Once I create a new agent, I will get a push notification from SignalR, which is the real-time messaging framework of .NET, of ASP.NET. And you all know about ASP.NET, so you are familiar with MVC and Web API. We'll get to those frameworks during the session. We'll dive deep into the frameworks and we'll show exactly how they're built. But basically, I think that shows you the capabilities of a real web application, not just a hello world. Okay.
Let me back it up that.
Okay.
So I also created a web application in Node.js.
What does that look like?
Let's
Hello
see.
world.
Okay, so it's this application, and I'm using a framework called Express. I'm going to show you Express later on in details. We're going to explore Express, but let me just run that one. Should be. And Node. Yes,
Sudo?
you are correct. Let me just do this.
ASP.NET doesn't require sudo.
No, you just need to run as administrator, which is so different.
You have the application to identity.
Okay, and down here I'm using the same port. You can see. So let me just go to.
This one is the
This
Windows
is
one.
yes. Let me, oops, spoiler. Let me just do this.
Okay, that looks almost the same. Can you show?
Okay, so
Focus?
let me just
Okay,
do
yeah,
this.
yeah.
I don't know if it's as pretty as your ASP.NET application, but it does the work.
I had colors in the observations earlier, so mine is better actually.
Yeah, I'm colorblind, sorry. Okay, so we're going to see the same application written in Node.js and in ASP.NET throughout the session today. We're going to see different parts of it, so I think that we can progress from here.
Wow. Any questions so far? Oh, they want to see code.
Yeah. Second round, development environment, my favorite. Okay, so how are you going to develop your ASP.NET application?
Visual Studio, of course. Unless you're someone who likes mono better, which you can use mono-develop, or if you don't like Microsoft that much, but on the other hand you like ASP.NET, you can also use open source development environments like Sharp Developer, which is available on Windows. The mono developer is available on Windows, on Linux, on Mac. But basically, Visual Studio, who needs more than that? Unless you're a Notepad kind of person and you want to use MSB for command line. Anyone uses MSB for command line? Yeah, okay, that's cool.
Actually, for a whole month, I think for .NET Framework 2, we were waiting for licenses from Microsoft, and I developed the full ASP.NET application web forms in Notepad++, and I had to do that. You don't need the MSP, you can just CSC, by the way.
Yeah.
Easier. Okay, so Node.js. Node.js is JavaScript, and you can write that in any text editor. I'm using Sublime Text, as you've probably seen, and that's just my favorite text editor, but you can use other editors. For example, you can use VI, you can use Emacs, you can use TextMate, you can use Notepad, you can use anything that you like, and it's very easy to do that. You don't need to buy anything, you don't need an IDE. And I'm going to show you how you can do everything without an IDE. However, if you want an IDE, you have several choices. There's WebStorm by JetBrains. Anyone use that? And it's awesome, isn't it? And WebStorm is a JavaScript IDE. You don't need it only for Node.js. Anything you do with JavaScript, WebStorm is a great tool to use. And if you're using ReSharper, it should be very familiar. You can use the same shortcuts. If you're not using ReSharper and you're used to plain old Visual Studio, for a couple of months now we had the option to install Node tools for Visual Studio. So you can basically run Node.js in Visual Studio just like C#.
Sorry, what is it called again?
Node tools for Visual Studio.
But can you debug?
You can debug.
Yeah.
Okay. Another big part of Node.js is actually the way Node.js handles dependencies. And for that, we've got a great combination of tool, online repository, things-harmonized kind of thing called NPM. And NPM is really one of the things that make Node.js awesome. Because NPM allows you to manage those dependencies that you use, and it really sorts out the open source world of Node.js in a very nice way. So you can find all those dependencies that you want. If you want to find a dependency to run, I don't know, Cassandra or SQL Server or whatever, you can just search and get a lot of information on the result that you're getting back, because they're basically Git repositories, and up until today, in the last 2.5 years I've been using it, all of them were GitHub repositories, so you can get statistics like stars and number of commits, and you can see exactly what's going on with that project, how many downloads, how many people are using it, how many packages are dependent on that. And you can get a good sense of a package if it is something that just 2 guys are using, or there's a whole community behind that, and that really is great for NPM. And NPM also do better with things that the .NET framework in general is not good with, because the way it resolves dependencies is simply loading a JavaScript module and assigning it to an object. So that means that you can have 2 dependencies from different versions in the same place. You can use both of them at the same time. You're not, you don't need to start your own app domain, and you don't need to load an assembly manually. You just require that model the same way that you use any other model, and that's it. You're good to go. What can you say about that?
Anyone remembers the term DLL hell? Yeah, that we had back in COM? Yeah, NuGet brought it back to ASP.NET. Yeah, unfortunately, but yeah, but basically we have something similar to NPM, and that's NuGet. NuGet exists, I think, ever since Visual Studio 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, it provides the same feature. I can search for a package. I can view its dependencies on other packages. I can even install unstable versions if I want to test out new stuff, pre-release. Yeah. I can even install older versions if I know that stuff don't work, because sometimes new versions break your code and you need to use older versions. We even have a command line for that. Okay? Yeah, it's a PowerShell command line. But no, NuGet is actually cool. Who here uses NuGet? You're basically using it even if you don't intend to use it, because once you create a new web application, unless it's the empty web application, if it's an MVC application or web API, you automatically install a bunch of NuGet packages. Okay, you get the default ones, of course, but if you update those packages, and yeah, that's something that is supported by NuGet, you can actually auto-update NuGet packages, you can enable your build server to download new versions of NuGet packages instead of just editing them to your source control. Okay, if you didn't know that, you can actually upload your code to source control without uploading the entire package folder. Okay, maybe I'll show how to do that later on. But I think NuGet is basically similar to the concept of NPM, except for maybe that topic where NPM can actually use different versions of the same module. In ASP.NET, if you try to use different versions of the same assembly in different projects, you'll probably get an assembly error during runtime, which happens to me about every 2 days. Okay, and then yeah,
You have to talk about cyclic references. My favorite in .NET.
Yeah. DS NuGet package uses that assembly, which comes from a different NuGet package, which uses an older versions of that assembly. So just choose which one you want to use. You can't use both. Okay, yeah, that happens, but hopefully not too much.
Okay. So you want to start showing how you are developing with?
Sure, why not? I'll try to remember how to do that. How do you start this thing?
Just like in Windows.
Okay, it's a Mac. I don't know if you want Mac.
I apologize for my colleague here.
Yeah. How do you start a new Visual Studio on a Mac?
You press the icon.
Oh, simple. Doesn't go.
You're already in it.
No, I want a new one. Let's start a new project. So, basically, as you know, when we create a new project, not JavaScript, God forbid, let's just C# here. Okay. So we'll create a new web application. This is Visual Studio 2013. Anyone uses that? Yeah? Great. If not, upgrade. So basically, the new Visual Studio 2013 gives you just one window to create new web applications instead of what we had in 2012, where we had a bunch of MVC3, MVC4. When we chose the MVC, it showed us an option to create a web API and a Facebook application, and the web forms was an entirely different template. Here we have all in one. Okay, so we have a dialog where you can choose if you want to create web forms or MVC or web API. So I'll just select the MVC one. And basically what it does now, it installs all the packages it needs for MVC in our web application. So if I check, for example, the list of NuGet packages that I have, okay, I will be able to see the entire list of NuGet packages that I'm using. So that's similar to what NPM provides, right? That configuration file. So if I want to install new packages, I can just right-click and right-click. Oh, how do you do right-click on a Mac?
2 fingers.
Okay. So I'm using Yaniv's Mac just to learn how hard it is to use a Mac, because I'm planning on buying one. So thanks for letting me try out. So if I want to add stuff like, I don't know, entity framework, for example, to access databases, can just select the NuGet package, search for that, We have the NugetPackage.org website where we can search for packages, view history of versions. Hopefully, at some point, we'll even have the option to select the version of the Nuget we want from inside this dialog. Currently, if we want an older version or a specific version that we're instructed to use, we need to use the command line tool, which is, by the way, built into Visual Studio, so we don't have to actually open a command line for that. We can do that from inside Visual Studio. This is actually already installed. Let me install stuff like Signal, for example. You don't have an internet connection here?
There's something wrong with NuGet. If you go to NuGet.org, they say
Oh, there's a problem today?
packages. Yeah.
Okay, so NuGet is down.
Sorry.
Okay, so basically I would have been able to add a NuGet package. I take your word for it that it doesn't currently work. Now, basically what we have here right now, if we look at the if we look at the file explorer, you'll see we have a package folder which is, come on, 2 fingers, no, help me out.
You're doing fine.
You're doing fine, embarrassing yourself, I didn't complete the sentence. So this is a 46 megabyte folder for a new project. Okay. Now, basically what I can do if I don't want to upload all that content to my source control, there's a cool feature in Visual Studio which is called Enable NuGet Package Restore. What it basically does, it just downloads, it's going to download the NuGet exe, which might not be available now. It downloads the NuGet exe into a project, and what it does, it just changes the configuration.
What do you do?
I didn't do anything.
Visual Studio, that's right.
Yeah, NuGet isn't available. It's not my fault. It's not Visual Studio's fault. It's NuGet. It's Microsoft. It's Microsoft's fault. So what it does, it downloads the exe. It configures your project not to upload any of the package folders to your source control. And once you check in the files, it will just check in your code without any assembly files. Once it's opened on another machine, once it's opened by your build servers, either Visual Studio or MS Build will notice that configuration that it needs to automatically download. It will connect to the internet, check the list of packages that you have, download everything for you. If you want, it can also update to the newest version. You can choose to do that. And it will basically allow you to just check in your files faster, switch between computers.
And deploy your application in a matter of weeks.
And not weeks, minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a problem with NuGet.
Yeah, currently.
Yeah. Let's cause a problem with NPM. All of you, download stuff from NPM. We have about 50 people here, truly enough.
Yeah. To be honest, it happened before with NPM. I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah. Applications fail. All of them. All the time.
Yeah, and basically,
Ido's application.
yeah, it's Visual Studio. I mean, who here managed to work with Visual Studio for over 5 hours in a row without having a crash? One. Are you using that on a Mac or on Windows?
He never gets up to enough speed to actually crash.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually got Visual Studio crashing yesterday after opening it and opening the file. It crashed. I closed, I opened it again, opened the same file, crashed. Opened it again, opened the same file, crashed. Eventually I just opened Visual Studio, waited for 5 seconds, closed all the open windows, and then it started working. It has its glitches, but you know, a Mac never crashes? No, actually.
Okay.
This is not good.
Okay,
so
let's
show your
do
things of Node.
the same with Node.js. I'm going to show you 2 alternatives. There are a lot more than that. So you've seen I've been using Sublime Text to edit my code, and it's very comfortable. I'm very happy with Sublime Text, and it really takes you like an hour to understand how faster you code with Sublime Text. So if you consider it, just go for it. And I can edit my code here, and one of the things that I really like to do when I'm running Node.js, when I'm writing my code, is not to run it using the Node process directly, but use a tool called NodeMon. And NodeMon basically watches my file system for changes. So now I have my application running. Let me just make sure that it's the right application. And let's just say that I want to add something. For example, let me just.
So just so I understand, you're going to change a file, and then your hosting environment will automatically update the server, and you will see it on the client side, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's just like ASP.NET. Okay. The type for now.
Okay, so I can just edit my code and refresh my browser, and that's nice. But one thing that we do use a lot is debugging tools. And Visual Studio has debugging built into it. It's not an issue, you don't need to know anything about it. If you are working with a text editor in Node.js, you can use another tool called Node Inspector. And the way you use Node Inspector, I think it's running in the background. Let me just check. Node Inspector. Okay, so I've started the debugger, and basically I can go to this URI now. Just open another tab. I'm going to use that. Sorry. Wrong browser for that. Okay, so this is my debugger environment. And now I can just do node -- debug and run my application. And so, yes.
Is there a way to make that the default?
I can, actually I don't know on a Mac. On Linux it's not a problem, but. And now I have my debugger in the browser environment. And it's pretty easy to set up, and you can actually have Node Inspector installed on your production servers, and if something is wrong, you can just convert one of them in a second to become a debugging environment. And that's an easier experience than attaching remote debugger in Visual Studio.
Yeah, just need to open a firewall, install the agent on the server. Yeah, no, not too long.
Okay.
Half an hour.
So let's
1 hour
refresh
to set
this
up.
page, and we hit the breakpoint here. So now I can just hover over this object and get all the data that I want, and I can easily debug my application.
Can you change that from here? Change the
Yeah,
code?
you can. You need to change the default configuration is that no, but you can change the configuration of Node mode, and you can actually edit from here. So this is Node mode. It's basically built around the debugging API of V8. V8 is the Chrome JavaScript engine, and it's actually the JavaScript engine that executes Node.js. And that's one way to do things. Another way to do things is use plain old Visual Studio. So let's go to application. Let's create a new project. File, new project. So other languages, JavaScript. And this is just the node tools for Visual Studio, and we got quite a few templates over here. We have from an existing Node.js code, so you can just take an existing Node.js project and create it. And we have some other templates like Express, which is the web framework that I'm using, that we can just simply create a new project. And now it runs npm in the background, and it's a good opportunity to show you npm.
So,
So-
it didn't crash.
Not yet. Okay, so npm basically is the NuGet for Node.js that actually works. And
Today, not.
I actually use that joke a lot, even when NuGet works. And the way you use npm the easiest way is just to go to the command line, and let's say that we want to install a package. Let's say that we want to install MongoDB. Oh, no, Couchbase. So npm sudo npm install.
I'm missing.
Yes. npm install Couchbase. I can run this, and now npm will just go to the online repository, look for a package that is called Couchbase, and fetch it and put it in a folder called node_modules in my working directory. That's good enough to start working. I can also tell it -- save, and just save that as a configuration in this package.json file, and this is equivalent to the NuGet XML file that you saw, only in JSON. And then I don't need to manage it manually. Now I can just use npm install, and npm will analyze my configuration. I can have things like wildcards for the version. So now npm will just bring the latest version whenever I run it, which is so much fun in production. And
But code doesn't break, you know.
yeah.
It's okay. Versions don't break. Yeah.
So let's just run this and hope I don't break anything.
There's also a global option for that, right? Like
Yes.
the global assembly cache of ASP.NET.
And actually, we've seen a couple of tools that we've been using, NodeMon and Node Inspector, and the way, first of all, let it finish, because Couchbase needs to build. It actually uses native C++, it's C, it's not C++ code, so it needs to build it locally. And this is important because it builds it for macOS. When I'm going to deploy it to my server, it's going to run on Windows. So I need to have npm running on my server doing the same thing, so I can get the native model in the correct configuration. So for example, NodeMon, sudo npm install sudo npm install NodeMon, just -g puts it in a global folder under user for Mac users, and that folder is in your path. So everything you install there, you can just run from the command line. You don't need to set up anything else. We already have NodeMon. So the last thing I want to show you is npm.org. And this is the front end for the npm repository, and you can get a lot of information from here. So for example, you can, one day too late. On Sunday we had 66,660 packages. It was so nice. It was just 6 packages shy of world domination. And but you can see how much it grows. I mean, that's almost 1,000 new packages in 2 days. We can see how many downloads in the last day. We can see how many downloads in the last week, how many downloads in the last month. And remember, some of those downloads are new application using those models. Some of them are new deployments. Okay? We can see other things like the recently updated modules. We can see things like the most dependent upon. And underscore is very popular for those. Anyone here uses underscore? No? So the rest of you JavaScript developers, you should start using underscore. It basically is linked in Java. In JavaScript, sorry. There's Express, and you can see that it's the 5th most dependent upon package, and you can get a good sense of the package if it's active or not. Let me just go into Express, and you can also see the downloads in the last day, the last week, and the last month. You can get to the GitHub repository. You can see a lot of the dependencies and some of the product that depends on that package and how to install it. But one of the nice things is how you search for packages. So do you have any needs that you want to know if there's a package in Node.js for? Anyone?
Yaman.
What?
Yaman?
Yaman. It's like this, right?
Yeah, I think it's the O after the.
O where?
Y-E-O.
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 Yeah. And no W.
No, no. Yes. Okay, and obviously you'll find packages for grunt here and anything. And only once in the session, I've been doing this for a while now, someone found something that there is no module for. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
What about SQL Server?
What?
Can you connect to SQL Server?
Yes, definitely. There's a SQL Server module.
There's also one in SPNet, I think.
Yes, Node SQL Server. And this was created by Microsoft. Okay, so just npm install Node SQL Server, and you can use your SQL Server. And if you want to do something awesome, just replace that with Couchbase.
Is there one for Event Magic?
For?
Event Magic?
How do you spell it?
I-M-A-G-E.
I-M-A. Ah,
Magic. M-A-G.
it's one word or?
One word. M-A-G-I-C-K. C-K.
Yes, there is. And I really find it hard to believe that you won't find a package for anything that you do, but if you do, it's an open source community and probably someone else needs that, so just create a model and contribute that. So let us just go to Visual Studio. I just want to show you that Visual Studio runs extremely slow.
Maybe it's trying to load the new package.
In the background. Ah, sorry. And now we have a Node application, an Express application in Visual Studio. And two things I want to show you here. First of all, it manages NPM, so you can just right-click here, manage NPM models, and you get the same crappy experience you get from NuGet. The other thing I want to show you is the fact that you can just put a breakpoint and debug. And basically Visual Studio runs Node.js in the background, opens the browser, hits a breakpoint, and you have this. So if you like Visual Studio, and there's nothing wrong with that, some of my best friends do, you can use Visual Studio and enjoy that.
So is that only available in 2013?
That is 2000.
About 2012?
Yes, it was. I upgraded last week.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
not a problem.
Oh, does it run in 2012? The
Yes, it does.
Project? Yeah.
Yeah. Under sudo, but okay. Let's continue.
What happened? Windows took over.
Exactly.
Okay, round 3.
Round
So,
three. Yes.
Well, we saw a bunch of the frameworks that are supported in ASP.NET. I'll just mention them again. Of course, we have the old web form, which is, by the way, still alive. Okay, Microsoft didn't kill it yet, and they're actually adding stuff. There were new stuff added in .NET 4.5 and new stuff added in 4.5.1. It's not dead yet. Okay, I don't know if they'll kill it at some point, but there is a large community that is still using web forms, so it will be probably keep going on for the next couple of years. And if not, it will just become an open source and you can fix the bugs yourself. We have MVC. The recent version is MVC 5 or even 5.1, if I'm not mistaken. Web pages, which I don't know if anyone uses that, along with dynamic data. Web API, of course, the newest version is 2.1, unless they already released 2.2. I haven't watched any tweets in the past couple of days because we were planning for this session. And of course, you have ASP.NET Signal, which is the ability to send push notifications to your clients, to your web clients, using WebSockets, browser frames, and different other techniques, and we'll look at that later on. So what do you have to offer in Node?
Okay, so we do have something that is called MVR. This is one of the concepts that Express is built on top, and you can turn it around to MVC really easily. I'm going to show MVC actually in this session.
So
but
model, view, what's the L?
Route. I'm not going to say it the way you do because I did once in Australia and my accent it went well. But can't do it. But you can basically build everything that you want. You just saw how we get that entry point to our Node.js server, and people do build different flavors of MVC and different flavors of running web applications. And if you guys are into web forms, you can probably build that in a decade or so in Node.js and open source. We have Socket.io, which is actually the influence for SignalR.
You know that Microsoft never invented a technology. They always look at what's out there and then create their own.
Yeah, there is a rumor that the saying in Microsoft for a lot of years was second and best. So, okay, databases. I should take over, that's my space. I just violated a trademark, right? It's the UK. Can't even say Sky. So, okay, in Node.js we can access any database you can think of. Okay, we have models for SQL Server, for PostgreSQL, for MySQL, for Oracle. That's the relational side of things. I forgot that I need to stand over here.
Yeah. So just to repeat the last sentence again.
No.
For the audience that will watch this session in a week.
We have support for all the major NoSQL databases. There are so many of them, you can't cover them all. But one of the things that does mix very well with Node.js is document databases, because most of them today use JSON, and JSON is just so natural in JavaScript. It's amazing. You just don't think about it at all. And of course, you have MongoDB is very popular in the Node.js community. I find Couchbase to be a better solution for almost anything than MongoDB. RavenDB is also supported. I had folks using Cassandra with Node.js, and I gotta say that one of the things that Node.js does better than other things is data access. And once you're using Node.js for that, because of the asynchronous nature of it, it just becomes so easy and so fluent. We also have something called ODM, which is a new notion for object data mapping. So you can actually create schemas for your object and use that schema as a model that you work with, and it is a well-known model as far as JavaScript can be well-known. And you can just use that the way that you're using ORM, but without all the twisting of arms to get object into tables if you're using document database. So for MongoDB, there's Mongoose, and Couchbase has a pretty new one. I can't remember the name, but you can find for both of them good tools.
And yeah, well, basically Node is a dynamic environment, so it really works well with document databases, which is a dynamic environment. ASP.NET, on the other hand, is a strongly typed environment, C#. Therefore, it manages relational database as best as it can. We have Entity Framework, we have Hibernate and other ORM tools, but we even support document databases, so there is a provider for Mongo and there is a provider for Couchbase. We can do some dynamic stuff that you guys can do with Node, yeah, but we can query a document database and get the entire object in return instead of just specifying the schema that we want. We can actually do that, but it takes a lot of lines of code. In JavaScript, I have to admit, I tried using Mongo with .NET, and it's a whole lot better to do it with JavaScript. What can I say? But basically, I think that most of the things that you can do in databases with Node.js, you can do with ASP.NET. You just need the proper framework. Okay, we even support Oracle, ODT.NET. Yeah. Other than that, it's databases. Don't use them. Use NoSQL.
And also, there's the real-time web experience.
I think that in this case, SignalR Socket.io basically provides the same features, right?
I have a surprise for you, because I think that SignalR, as far as features go, is better.
You mean about the ability to connect to service bus and Redis servers?
Yes.
Stuff like
Redis
that?
you can do kind of with the Socket.io, but it is further down the line. Although it started later, there are more advancements in SignalR. And actually, if you are interested in SignalR, I have to do this. I have a session tomorrow on SignalR at the same time, so you can come and learn all about SignalR. However, in performance, Socket.io does better. This is a benchmark that once again, we need to define better, but for a client of mine, they found that they just could connect so much many more clients to one server in Socket.io than SignalR. So there's a trade-off here, and SignalR is a great tool, and I'm going to go through great length to explain tomorrow. But Socket.io has the same capabilities. The support for techniques is a little bit more elaborated in Socket.io, but other than that, more or less the same capabilities here.
Okay, so I think we can do a small demonstration of those frameworks. Escape, you said?
Yes.
There's an escape button in the Mac keyboard. So I just want to show a few of the highlights of MVC and Web API and SignalR. Let me just get this application back. So as I mentioned, the application that we built uses MVC, Web API, and SignalR. So for example, if I look at MVC, one of the cool things that I really like with MVC is the scaffolding option. Anyone using scaffolding in MVC? Yeah, that's a really cool feature, because when I use scaffolding, so for example, if you look at this part of the screen, you'll see that I'm actually, I have here a partial view that shows how to add a new agent. Okay, so it has an ID field, a full name, and an alias. Now, if I go back to my code and I want to check how this is built, it's actually built using one line of code. Okay, editor for model just iterates my model class, which is the agent class. No. Where's the? Oh, never mind. I'll just click it. I'm not buying the Mac. Okay, so zoom in. So I have my model here, and I have stuff like, for example, instructions not to scaffold some of the properties. I can specify, for example, the display name for some of the fields, just so it won't be displayed as full name, one word, but instead displayed as 2 words, full name. I can add validation rules here. It's not part of the scaffolding. It's actually part of the scaffolding. It's part of the validation model that I have. So, for example, if I specify that this field is required and the length is 100 characters, then when I get back to, which one is it? This one? Yeah. When I get back to here and I try to create an agent, I automatically get validation messages, and these validation messages were actually created by MVC for me by just going over the agent object, identifying the validation rules, and generating JavaScript rules for that part of the code, and it will actually generate server-side rules just in case some end user who thinks of themselves as developers send a post request directly to the server and try to bypass my validation rules. So I will also use the same validation rules that I have, for example, when saving the entity. Okay, I can just use entity framework to validate the same rules and just inform me if that entity is okay or not. So I have scaffolding, which is great. I've got Web API, which is a great mechanism for mapping HTTP requests to what is known as action methods. The concept of Web API, if you are familiar a bit with it, is the same concept as MVC. We have controllers. Only in MVC they're called controllers, in Web API they're called API controllers. So for example, for the agency I have an agent controller that provides me the ability to manage the agent entity, okay, that resource. I can create new agents, I can pull information from the database about a single agent or a list of agents. I can even upload stream of an image to the server and replace a local file with that image that I got, all through the basic concepts of Web API using HTTP request messages It's a very robust framework for creating HTTP-based services. And by the way, just like Yaniv said, if you happen to know Web API and you want to know some of the cool stuff of Web API, what's known as the advanced stuff, I have a session tomorrow morning, early morning, 9:30, about the advanced features of Web API, the pipelines, security concepts, how to use streaming in Web API. So if you are familiar with Web API and want to know a bit more, then hop by to my session. And Signal, we forgot to mention Signal. So let's see exactly what goes on when I'm adding a new agent. So let's add Yaniv. It does. Okay, alias. Okay. So what happened here is that I sent a post request to the server. The server then sent information to the database, and instead of returning an agent object and allow the JavaScript to add that object to the view, it actually sent a message through Signal to all of the open clients. And if I had more browsers open showing the same application, you would have seen that the line, the Yaniv Rodenski line, would automatically appear on each and every one of the browsers, just because all of the browsers are connected to the Signal R hub. It looks something like this. Let me just show you. Okay, so I have here the JavaScript resource for Signal, this one and the one above it. And as you can see, all my JavaScript is in the HTML file. I hate JavaScript, so I don't care about organizing the content. So in here you can see that I'm creating a connection to my agent's hub, and I'm adding a function that handles incoming messages from the Signal hub. So when I get a message back with the information about the new agent, I simply parse that string into a JSON object and pushing it to my view model. I'm using knockout on the client side, so I'm just able to push it to the model and it will automatically show up in my view, in my client side view. All I need to do is start the connection to the hub. Currently the browser will start listening to Signal hub. If my browser supports WebSockets, it will accept the message, it will receive the message over WebSockets. If it's an older browser, doesn't support WebSockets, it can use long polling, forever frames, any other technique that exists in browser to do what is called polling, long polling, stuff like that. Okay.
Both browsers and Internet Explorer.
And yeah, and Internet Explorer. It does support WebSockets as a version 10, I think. You have something to show?
Yeah, sure. Let's see the same application in Node.js. And first of all, I want to show you the fact that I have controllers. So, for example, the agent controller is using Express, and this is the Express application. It's actually a wrapper around the HTTP server, and it allows me to do things like routing. So here I have a route for this specific URI, and you can see that this is the path, and I also can get some of it as a parameter. And just like Ido, I'm also using some kind of wrapper for my entity. So I have the agent entity, and here I'm using the ODM, the Mongoose ODM. I just created the schema for our document, and from that schema I'm creating my model. And now what I need to do is to pass it along to my controller when I initialize it. And I can do things like call the find function or the create function here. So I actually get the same experience as working with entity framework, or a similar experience as working with entity framework. However, I don't have any way to annotate my model, and I don't have scaffolding. Everything you're gonna see was lovingly handcrafted by me on a plane. But but other than that, I can do a lot of things. So for example, if I'm just going to take a look at my view, and I did separate my JavaScript from my HTML view. This is my view engine, it's Jade. It's one of few options that we have in Express. So we can use Jade, which is based on Hamil. And actually, anyone knows if you can use the same style of view engines in .NET? No? Ido?
Yeah, you have Hamil.
Okay. However, you have other view engines. You have things like EJS, and EJS is basically based on placeholder, angle brackets with percentage, so it looks exactly like classic S or Razor. And this is my view, and you can see several things here. First of all, I have, this is my layouts, but I have includes, which are basically other parts of my view. So in partials, I have the add agent. Okay, this is my add agent view. However,
it has more lines of code in mind.
Yes, it does. But I do know what each line of code does.
I reflect on
And I'm missing something. I'm gonna show you bound. Let's take a look at this one. So this is just binding to a model. It's a simpler example, but this is how binding to a model looks like in Jade. Again, if you are using EJS, that's going to look exactly like you do in, almost exactly like you do in Razor. And the last thing I think that I should show you is probably how I'm using Socket.io. So Socket.io I'm actually bootstrapping here in my, sorry, wrong application, I'm bootstrapping here. Basically I'm just requiring another package, Socket.io, and I'm calling the listen function and passing it along the server. So now I have Socket.io, which I can pass along to my controller when I start it. In the agent controller, in the post route, and this is how I handle post, I can just use the request body, and it uses a middleware component called body parser. It comes with Express to parse JSON into objects. And I'm creating the agent, and eventually all I need to do is io sockets.emit, a name for the event, and the data I want to emit. That's it. As simple as that. Just emitting event using socket.io. On my client, let me just close this project. On my client. So this is my JavaScript for the client. I have this. I'm using basically, I should have shown you. This is another partial included I'm using, and the last JavaScript that I'm running here is /socket.io/socket.io.js. And this is not actually a JavaScript file on my file system. This is something that is being created on the fly by Socket.io. And now that I have it here, it defines my Socket.io in the client, so I can just connect to my server, as simple as that. And I can just register to event. So this is the event for new agent. I'm getting the data, I can write it to console, I can push it to the agents array, and that's it. It is simpler than SignalR. There are some capabilities which are missing, and some capabilities that you need to add yourself with some code if you want. So I think we know how the application works, and we're almost out of time, so let's continue. Security, it's your turn. Start.
How much time do I have? 2 hours? 3? Okay.
Just go.
Just go. You can do everything that exists in security in ASP.NET, okay? How many people here are using Windows authentication with ASP.NET? Okay, how many people are using OAuth? Okay, OpenID. By the way, it's supported as of last week by built-in classes. You don't need to actually write everything on your own. ASP.NET supports every type of authentication you can think of, and if it's not built into ASP.NET or using the OIN extensions, you can just look for it in a NuGet package, and most probably someone already created a NuGet package for, I don't know, Dropbox. Okay.
You're confused with the FPM.
No, it's the same ASP.NET in that case. So you have the ability to use ASP.NET for authentication, authorization. You also have the ability to use ASP.NET for impersonation, which I don't know if it's supported by Node. I don't know if Node needs that, on the other hand. We have OIN in ASP.NET, which allows us to create new middleware to use stuff like claim-based identities and claim-based authorization. We can connect ASP.NET to Active Directory, to ADFS, to Windows Azure Active Directory, to Facebook, Google IDs, Microsoft IDs. Any type of security mechanism that you need, you have in ASP.NET. You also have code security options. You have obfuscation for assemblies. I mean, it's Microsoft, you know. They like security.
Okay, so in Node.js we basically don't need security. It's JavaScript, we love that, we love everyone. No, in Node.js we have several ways to manage security. I think that the most important library here is something called Passport. And Passport basically is an infrastructure that has plugins for a lot of identity providers. So you can use it to connect almost to anything, even ACS. Is ACS still alive?
Yeah, for now.
For now. So Azure ACS you can use. You can use Twitter, Facebook, Gmail, actually anything that provides proper identification protocols. You probably have an implementation for that. And Passport is probably the path you're looking for if you were trying to use it. Actually, when you're using IIS, you also get the IIS authentication mechanisms, which you can use. And the last thing that Node.js provides is a built-in support for HTTPS, so you can use and should use HTTPS if applicable for your application. Want to show how we can set up security easily with both?
Yeah, sure, why not? With both, I don't know Node.js, you'll have to do that part.
I'm tired.
Yeah, but it was quite easy to do it with .NET. Ever since we got the OIN middleware, it's very easy to add new security layers into ASP.NET. So the security layer that we are using is called Auth0. We installed it through a Windows Azure store. It basically provides a server that allows us to get claims from it. It's what is called as an STS, a security token service. What I needed to do is just create a new Auth0 server. It's automatically created in Amazon, so it's not a problem. I got an ID, a password to connect to that server, and what I needed to do is just add a NuGet package to my application and start using it. So if we look at the list of packages, I have a package here called Auth0 ASP.NET OIN. If you're using Visual Studio 2014 and .NET 4.5, you can create an OIN startup class and just add to the configure the line for use Auth0 authentication. This is a middleware that uses Auth0, and basically what it does, it checks every request that you send to the server, and if that request doesn't contain any authorization ID, it will just send back a 401 unauthorized, and you'll need to get yourself authenticated against Auth0. So I've added a control to the UI. I got it from the Auth0 page. Once I press the login button, I automatically get a pop-up that asks me to log in into Auth0. So I'll log in using my my account. What's that?
You open my
I opened your Outlook. Okay. You have new way.
apparently.
Yeah, I can connect using built-in identities, using Gmail. Okay. What happens here is that I have the wrong password. What's my password? That's why you don't save passwords in browsers. So,
That's your application.
yeah,
it's not
that's my
user.
application. Oh, right, that's my application. I need to run it from my machine. Okay, so I'll explain the process. Once I'm entering my credentials for the Auth0 server or for Gmail, it basically, for example, if I'm using Gmail, it will connect Gmail, it will connect the Google server, send my credentials, get back a token from Gmail. It will send that token to Auth0 server and will get back a token that represents my user in the Auth0 environment. The browser will send that token with the request to my web server. My web server will validate that token using the middleware that I created here. Okay, so this middleware basically what it does, it just validates the token that I got from the Auth0 server and then extracts the claims from that token. Okay, claims can be my name, my email, my underwear size, whichever information I put into my Gmail account. And once it does that, it can even bring back my list of roles and transform them into role-based authorization. And if I want to require an authenticated user that belongs to a specific role, I can simply go to my, for example, to my agent controller and require that in order to use this controller, the user must be authenticated, which I do it using the authorized attribute, and I can even specify that they need to have the role of an admin. Okay, so authorized means the user is authenticated. It will check that I indeed provided a token. The admin is basically one of my claims. So if I have one of the claims that says I'm an admin, I will be able to run this API controller. I can use the same attribute, only from different namespace in MVC. It basically allows me to just secure my application using both authentication and authorization quite easily. And basically, I'm using the agents controller here with the authorized header. I didn't even tell Web API which security mechanism I'm using. So I can replace that middleware from Auth0 to Active Directory or ADFS, and it will work just the same on the service side. Okay, so it's very easy to integrate security into your web application. You just need to select which authentication provider, identity provider you want to use. Okay, so
Okay.
Node?
Yes. So I'm going to use the same Auth0 mechanism in Node, sorry, application. And basically I'm requiring here passport. As I told you, it's the base for all authorization in Node.js, or most authorization. I'm also loading something called it's basically the setup module that I've created for Auth0. It's here. It got my key and my client ID. Anyone wants to take a picture?
Scroll to the right a bit more.
Yes. Okay. And before you think that I'm just storing my access keys in JavaScript, remember that this JavaScript runs on the server, so it's not as bad as you think. But if you want to store it somewhere else, there are safer ways to do that. So here I'm just configuring my passport application. Back again. Here. And actually, that's almost everything that I need to do. This is the callback. This is where we are going to go once we're authenticated. We just need to give Auth0 an address to redirect once we log in. And this is just callback. And if you want to do that, all you need to do is open your account, create your application, and you get a step-by-step tutorial by Auth0, exactly what to do with your data, with your credentials already. So all you need to do is just copy-paste your code, and that's it. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it is very easy. The last thing that I am doing is over here, and over here. So what I get after I log in is an object called user, a property called user in the request. So if I run my application, just installation. And you should be able to see some glue. Ah, sorry. Yes. Just gonna use my Google account because it is my computer. And I've logged in. And this is my user. And I get everything here, the claims, all the data that I need, email address,
pen size.
it's not in there. The one thing Google doesn't know about me is my pen size, and that's because I bother to change it all the time. Just the way it is. So basically it's as easy as that. There's nothing else to show you, I guess. Let's continue. Hosting. We're almost done. We're over time.
No, you're.
Yes.
Yeah.
Almost.
So basically, I think that Node is mostly similar to ASP.NET in sorry in this topic. Basically, ASP.NET hosted under IIS. Of course, if you're using Mongo instead of the Microsoft.NET framework, you can even host ASP.NET on a Linux machine under Apache. You can even host parts of ASP.NET, not MVC, but Web API and Signal, for example. You can even self-host those parts by using Owin and Katana, which are the new frameworks for self-hosting that do not require using IIS. Okay, so you can even create a Web API service and self-host it outside of IIS if you don't want the entire IIS overhead of logging and application tools and the enormous pipeline, that sort of stuff. Okay, and I think Node is quite similar in that way, right?
On Windows, yes, Node runs well under IIS, and actually on Windows you should try to do that if you are running your Node on Windows for a very simple reason. IIS uses HTTP/sys, the kernel level driver, and that just helps so much if you're using HTTP. It can handle better persistent connections and caching, and you just want to do that if you're in Windows. However, Node is purely cross-platform, and you can run it on Linux, and there's not a problem. And there are hosting environment for that. There's Forever.js, which has been around forever, and there's a new one called PM2, and they're constantly competing with each other, and you have a variety of tools to host Node.js on Linux as well. Another thing that is very nice and easy on Node.js is hosting in the cloud. And we've been talking a lot about cross-platform in this session, but I think that, no, I don't think, I'm sure that the best cloud experience you can get for Node.js is Windows Azure. And I know I'm a Windows Azure MVP, but believe me, if it wasn't the case, I will tell you. If there was something on AWS, on Google Cloud, anywhere that works better, Heroku, I would tell you. I'm so happy with the way Windows Azure hosts Node.js. It is magic for me. And you can
it is IIS underneath.
It is, yes, I know. And as I told you, on Windows, that's your best option. And you can host Windows Azure on websites, Node.js on websites. You can actually host it on cloud services. It just involves a lot of PowerShell scripts to create your project and things like that. But it is possible, and you can also spin off a virtual machine and run it on any OS that you want. You can do the same basically in AWS and Rackspace. You can use Heroku, and Heroku is getting a very a lot of buzz for being a very good platform. I gotta say, I've tried it for Node.js, and it wasn't as simple and as fluent, and didn't give me anything that I didn't find easier in Windows Azure. And there's some basically private cloud PaaS solutions that have Node.js support. OpenShift and Cloud Foundry both have simple support for Node.js. So I have one client that are moving to OpenShift, and it's actually, OpenShift is as simple as Windows Azure, but just runs on premises.
And of course, you can get hosting of web applications in ASP.NET under all sorts of clouds. Of course, Windows Azure on websites or virtual machines or even cloud services with the web wall. You can even have your ASP.NET hosted on AWS, whether you're using a Windows virtual machine in EC2, or even if you're using the Elastic Beanstalk, which allows you to host .NET-based web applications. Even Rackspace or even PaaS solutions like AppHub, you have plenty of options to host ASP.NET applications in the cloud, not only Microsoft solutions such as Windows Azure. Okay, we actually went a step further and we've deployed, right, our applications.
You want to show them how we deploy?
Well, I can show them in just quickly because we are running out of time. I'll just show the steps in general. How many people here use web deploy with ASP.NET? Web deploy? No? Okay. So if you're not familiar with the concept, you can actually just right-click or right-click is a bit hard here. Okay. Right-click and just select Publish. And the Publish window in Visual Studio actually uses web deploy. What web deploy is, it's a framework created by Microsoft that you install a server agent on your server machine. You have the client tool in your application. If you use Visual Studio, you can install the client application. Sorry. Even if you don't have Visual Studio on your machine, it's called MS Deploy or Web Deploy. And what I can do is I can just enter the information of my web server, the name of the website I want to create, username and password to connect to that server. And for example, this information I retrieved from Azure websites. Okay, there's a simple option. Do you have the Azure website here? Annoying keyboard. It's getting easier every minute. So maybe I will buy Mac.
What you see here is someone converting his religion live. Have you ever seen that in a session?
Can I pull out this command and put it in Windows?
I'll show you how.
Yeah. Do you have a flyer?
Okay.
So all I did was to go to this website, select my website, which was ASP versus Node, and in the dashboard I have the option to download the publish profile. This basically downloads a file that gives me all the information I need to put here, and there's basically an option just to import that file into Visual Studio. Okay. If you have your subscription, your Azure subscription set inside Visual Studio, you can basically just import from the Azure website, just open the combo box and it will show you the entire list of websites that you have. But Yaniv's machine is not connected to my account, I think. So just right click and publish, finish the process. It will first deploy the entire application, and then if you are doing any changes, publish again. It will just deploy the delta changes. It won't deploy all the assemblies again. And once it's done, you can simply go to that website, browse it. Let's see what it is. Browse that website, and you'll get the same application that you had on premises. If what happened? What happened? Should work. Worked yesterday. Oh, wait a minute. ASP agency. Sorry, wrong website. The agency.
Just go to the correct website.
Yeah. Okay, and you'll get the same application just running in the cloud someday.
Eventually.
It's your Mac's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so same application, same database in the cloud, same information, same data, same everything, but running in the cloud. And the same, I think you did, only instead of using web deploy, you used something else, right?
Yes, so let me just show you how you can do that.
I hope you're not too hungry. We'll take about 2 hours of your time.
So, for Node.js, I have another way to deploy. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to create the website, and I'm not going to do that using the portal as Ido did. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to use the Azure CLI tools. By the way, anyone ever use the Azure CLI tools here?
You should start by asking, is anyone using Azure? Anyone using Azure? Okay.
So this is the Azure CLI tools, and you can see you should always show the ASCII art on top. And anyone here knows how to install that?
The Azure CLI?
The Azure CLI, don't tell them. The way you install it is npm install Azure CLI -g for global. This is how you get the Azure CLI. That's the only way you can get the Azure CLI, I think. And as you probably guessed, it is a Node.js model. However, what I can do with it, I can do several things. I'm going to create a site. So Azure site create. Let's call this DevWeek 2014. No. Let's hope no one got the name. Oh, sorry. Forgot one important thing. I want to do --git. And what happens now is not only the CLI tool is going to create a website for me, it's going to create two Git repositories. One on the website and one locally in my directory. Let's put it in Northern Europe, which is Dublin.
I can do that using PowerShell. Don't need NPM for that.
Okay, good for you. Now, publishing username, and now all I need to do is the following: git add and git commit.
By the way, of course, Git doesn't have to do anything with Node per se. Okay, you can also manage ASP.NET projects with Git. Just you need once to show up his command line skills.
Yeah. So git push Azure, that's the remote repository, and I'm going to push the master branch. And the password. And what we are going to see here is two things. First of all, you're going to see the git push. So files are coming up to my website. The second thing that we are going to see in a second is npm running in the background. And that's important because I have MongoDB running in there, and that's a native model. It needs to have the right dependencies, it needs to be built for Windows. So this is how I'm deploying my Node.js application. And obviously, because it is Git, if you are changing anything, it's just going to upload the diff.
How much time does it take?
Should be over now.
Nope.
Now. Okay, I think we don't have the time for the benchmark.
No, we're just going to talk about the benchmark in general. So while it's running, let's just get back to the session.
Okay. And we've done that.
Okay, so the last thing that we need to talk about, and I expect that that's probably one of the reasons that you got to this session, is actually understanding, well, which one is better, ASP.NET or Node. Yesterday night, around midnight, Yaniv and I sat down and started to do some testing, some benchmarking of ASP.NET and Node, because we don't trust any of the online benchmarks. We wanted to try some stuff of our own. And we did try to write some basic web API services versus Node services, some MVC views versus Node views with J, just to get a general comparison of how fast Node versus ASP.NET, if at all. We also created some code that is very CPU intensive to calculate prime numbers, just to see if Node is able to use CPU as well as ASP can. Also try to create some I/O operations in Node and ASP just to see how
Yeah,
they...
how did that go?
Yeah, it didn't go that well for ASP.NET. Yeah, but that's not my fault. It's the website's fault who hosted it because it didn't have enough ports to do all the testing. So how were the results? It's, first of all, API.
API comparison, the speed was almost the same.
Yeah,
Different variations.
Yeah, we created services that serialize a bunch of objects, small objects, large objects, and I think on a single core machine, the speed was about 340 requests per second, something like that.
With minor variations between the two, and the only thing is that the resource consumption for Node was half of what ASP.NET consumed.
Regarding memory, yeah.
So that's one thing. I
Yeah.
think next was the view rendering.
Yeah, and I think I beat you there. I think I managed to do around 280 or 300 requests per second. How well did you do with Jade?
Around 40.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure actually if it's Jade or if it's Razor that's really fast, but probably you should test if other view engines provide
Yes.
better results. Yeah.
I will.
What about the CPU one?
I think I almost completed the first request by now.
Okay. Yeah, we did a small CPU test where we created a loop that calculates the first 10,000 prime numbers, and I ran it on my computer, which is an i7 core, and it ran a single iteration. It took it about 7 seconds to calculate the first 10,000. When we ran it on a single core, we reduced the number of iterations just so it will complete on time, because we didn't do just one test at a time. We did multiple concurrent connections to the server just to see how ASP and Node manages concurrent connections. So it was a single core handling 10 concurrent connections. So for ASP,
And you should expect the result, because one thing I didn't tell you is that the Node.js processes, V8 has only a single thread. So doing that, having multiple requests for CPU bound, basically resulted the way that everyone say it does.
it didn't
And-
finish. Yeah, we did a test for about a minute, just sending requests to the server. ASP.NET was able to handle the 10 concurrent requests in under 6 seconds, so it was about 6 seconds per request. I think that by the time we finished the test, the Node server didn't complete any request, right?
No. And of course, there's the one thing that Node.js is supposed to beat the crap out of ASP.NET, and apparently they found some
Yeah.
limitations on Windows Azure website, so we couldn't find the benchmark.
Yeah, we tried to do some I/O bound tests, a basic service, a web API service that what it does, it basically just opens an HTTP connection to a remote server and tries to download the file. And it appears that if you do that in .NET, you get a problem where you have too many open ports that you used before, and you can't actually reuse them until they close, and it takes some time to close them, and we run it in a website where we can't actually control the server and change the number of seconds it waits before reopening the port. So yeah, it failed. Yeah, it crashed. It started returning HTTP 500 service internal server errors, and that's where I just gave up and said, okay, there's one thing that Node is better than ASP.NET.
And that's actually the thing that Node is best at. I/O-bound operation, that's what Node is built around. That's the main idea of Node.js, and you should use Node.js mainly for that. So, we're over time, so let's just wrap this up. Both frameworks have a valid place. Actually, there are a lot of other frameworks that you can use and probably should use. Just make sure that you are using the right tool for the right job. If you are using something to do CPU work, make sure it's not Node.js. For I/O-bound operation, you probably better are off with Node.js. And try to have fun. That's the most important thing. You can have fun with any language except Java.
Yeah. And just one last thing, if you want to get a copy of our web API, our ASP.NET code and compare it to the Node code, we will upload that code in about an hour to the address that you see there written on the board. Okay, so it's OneDrive /1IG72BC. Just go ahead and enter that address in about an hour, and you'll see both the slide deck and the demo code from both the Node version and the MVC version. You can just compare the two. Okay. So thank you very much for coming, and we will be here for the next couple of minutes if you have any questions. Enjoy the rest of the conference and lunch, of course.
Would you actually introduce yourself?
Sure, why not? Hi everyone, my name is Ido Flatow. This French accent is because I come to you from Israel, from a company called Seller Group. I'm a Microsoft MVP for IIS and ASP.NET. And among other things, I wrote a bunch of courses for Microsoft, the official WCF course, the official Web Services and Azure course, also a couple of books about .NET and single-page application development. I like to write stuff whenever my wife lets me, because it takes a lot of time. And other than that, I also manage the Israeli web user group. So if you, by any chance, come to Israel during the third week of the month on Tuesday, you're more than welcome to join our user group. It will be in Hebrew, so I may have to give you a translator. But other than that, you should have fun. Okay. Yaniv?
Yes, so my name is Yaniv Rodenski, and just like Ido, I come from Sela in Israel, and I'm a Windows Azure MVP. I'm also an author. I wrote the Windows Azure course with Ido, and I'm currently about to finish my book debut on a Couchbase server. So if you guys are into NoSQL, we're hoping it will turn out great. I also manage a user group, the Windows Azure user group in Israel, but for the past year I've been transitioning back, or past 2 years, transitioning back from doing cloud-oriented things more towards the big data NoSQL space. Web development in JavaScript is still a big passion for me, so I'm doing Node.js as much as I can. So now we've introduced ourselves, let's introduce the frameworks. Round one. So first of all, I want to ask you, how many of you ever developed in Node.js, ever tried Node.js? Okay.
So let me ask the same. How many have been developing in ASP.NET? Oh, I win. We can go wrong.
No pressure.
The question is, by the end of the day, how many people will shift? You know?
We'll see. I'll try to be convincing. Okay, so do you want to introduce ASP.NET?
Yeah, but I think all the people here already know ASP.NET, so let's be brief about it. ASP.NET, age of 13, 14 if you count .NET 1.0, but no one cares about that version. If you're familiar with ASP.NET, the base installation is about 150 megabyte. The base CLR assemblies, when you upload a new application into the memory, it's about 6 to 7 megabytes, so it's not that much. Of course, you can't use only the CLR when you're using ASP.NET, so by the time you upload all your assemblies into the memory, entity framework, system web, and all the other stuff, a basic ASP.NET weighs about, how much? 60, 70 megabyte, right? Something like that. We have a bunch of styles for developing in ASP.NET. We have the original.
When you go back, start converting your ASP.NET code to be asynchronous. I'm serious. That's the one thing that you need to remember from this talk.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize what Yaniv said now. Yaniv mentioned before that it takes about half a second to create a new thread when you're using .NET. That's almost true. The concept of the thread pool in .NET, which is what ASP.NET is using, is that when you send a request to a service, to a server, ASP.NET will create a new thread to handle that request. Now, if you just started the server, there are no available threads. So ASP.NET needs to create a new thread for that, from the thread pool. Now, the thread pool will not create a thread immediately. Okay, it will only create a thread immediately if it has a few threads. The number of threads that will actually check, it will only create threads if you have less threads than the number of cores in the machine. So on an 8-core machine, it will only create threads for the first 6 or 7 requests. I mean, think of it, you have the main thread, you have the GC thread already running, you don't have enough available threads. After that, after the first 6 requests, it will actually queue up the request to create a new thread, and the thread pool will dequeue those requests every 500 milliseconds. So if you have, like, I don't know, 50 concurrent requests because all the people came in the morning to the office, open the computer and press enter to open your application, it will take about 5 or 6 minutes until everyone gets the requests answered. Okay, because they will just queue up and they will be handled sequentially. It doesn't mean that you can't fix that. Okay, if this was an advanced ASP.NET session, maybe I would show you how. Just a small tip: thread pool.set mean threads. Okay, that will fix your problem and will allow you to handle more concurrent requests at a single time. But basically, what Yaniv mentioned is true. If you use asynchronous calls in ASP.NET, if you want to call your database, use asynchronous Ido.NET. If you want to call other web services, call asynchronous HTTP calls. If you want to write to the file system or to a network stream, use asynchronous file I/O or network I/O. Okay? If you do that, you will be using the asynchronous I/O completion ports of Windows, and you will be able to release those managed threads back to the thread pool.
You know, they're here to escape the parallel programming session by Sasha. Let's talk about web development.
Okay, so basically, I win because it's C# and not JavaScript. But let's be frank. I mean, ASP.NET is 13 or 14 years old, depends how you look at it. We have plenty of tools. We have plenty of debuggers. We even have the ability to remote debug our servers. We have profilers. We have a lot of tools both to create, manage, and to diagnose our applications. I think it's a very robust framework in comparison.
Correctly on Windows, making sure that Node.js interacts correctly with Microsoft products like SQL Server, and Microsoft are really committed to that. And if we are talking about open source efforts from Microsoft, I think that Node.js represents that better than ASP.
You want to continue?
Continue. Okay, so let's talk about the strengths of Node.js. Node.js, as I told you, is very lightweight. Now, in this day and age when every one of us has a powerful computer in his pants somewhere, it doesn't seem like a very important attribute. But if you consider running in the cloud, where you pay for every compute resource that you consume, Node.js can become very efficient in that. And for some applications, specifically IO-bound application, Node.js excels with doing a lot with very few resources. So it's a very important attribute of Node.js. And it is built around the concept of asynchronous I/O. In fact, that C framework that Ryan Dahl built to begin with, and is still the base for Node.js, was an asynchronous API for C. That's what started Node.js. And of course, he had to adopt something else for developers because no one wants to write C code anymore. And
C or C++?
no, C.
Because I can do C++. C is not the question.
Okay. And asynchronous I/O is important. In fact, it is also important if you're doing ASP. And Ido is going to see some asynchronous ASP. But asynchronous I/O basically allows us to use better our compute resources, many threads. Okay, so a lot of the I/O work that we're doing is done on threads which are operated by the operating system. For example, all of you run on Windows. Anyone knows what IO completion port is? IOCP? Just about. Okay, so Windows, for example, as an operating system, has dedicated threads to read data back from IO devices. And in fact, you don't need the thread that started the call to write or read from a disk, from network card, to be waiting there. There's another thread dedicated, always running there, waiting for the answer. And Node.js and also ASP.NET know how to take advantage of that, so you can release your threads back and just get better better use out of them. And before you think that threads, setting of threads is not important, because we all learned that flow is what's going on now. We all have multi-cores and we all need to parallel our work. I want you to consider what it means for the .NET framework, for example, to request a new thread. Anyone knows what the minimal memory consumption for a new thread in the .NET CLR?
ASP.NET Web Forms, we have MVC, something that's called dynamic data that I don't think anyone is using today, other than Microsoft for demos. There's also a single page application framework called Web Pages. And of course, we have Signaler, Web API, and some other cool stuff. Of course, ASP.NET is from Microsoft, originally from the .NET framework, but today ASP.NET is basically open source, or should I be more specific and say source open? Since the source is open, you can view it. I don't know how many people are actually contributing to ASP.NET that and they are not Microsoft employees. I mean, anyone here contributing to ASP.NET? Yeah, we don't have time for that, right?
Actually, I heard it on the first year they had 2 contributions.
Oh, 2.
2.
2 people or just 2 fixes?
Probably 2 commits.
Yeah.
But they weren't that specific.
Yeah.
Okay, so Node.js in the right corner. Node.js is quite new. It's been around for around 5 years, and it is pretty lightweight. We're talking about 6 megs, but when you run a full MVC application, it goes between 30 and 40 megs. It's lighter than ASP.NET, and it remains light for a long time, as far as I've seen in application in production. So this is one of the nice attributes about it. We're going to talk about it later on. Styles of development, as we will see, Node.js is very flexible. You can, I'm tempted to walk away from you, but Node.js is very flexible. You have styles like MVC and MVR, which we are going to see.
Okay.
You Microsoft guys. Okay, but you can adapt any style of coding that you like. What else do we want to say about it? It's open source. It started as a pet project by a guy called Ryan Dahl, and it was a very interesting project because anyone knows in which language Node.js started in? No one? C. It started as a C framework, and after a while no one used it, so he decided to look for a managed environment and ended up with using JavaScript. And that's the story of Node.js. Ryan Dahl works for a company called Joyent. They're a cloud provider, very interesting cloud provider, I must say. And they're backing Node.js. But in addition, other companies are backing Node.js. Nodejitsu is backing, or was backing Node.js. There was a big fight over this for the past few months. Microsoft is backing Node.js. In fact, I personally know teams, one team in Microsoft, that are working solely on maintaining Node.js and writing code for Node.js, making sure that Node.js runs. No one? 1 megabyte, roughly. And how long does it take for the .NET CLR to actually request a new thread from the operating system, because it needs to request that from the operating system?
Just stop for a second. Are you now talking about ASP.NET because I can go?
No, I'm talking about the importance of being asynchronous, because it's one of the most important attributes of Node.js. And the answer is that they estimate it as 1 second. And this is why when you're using .NET and the thread pool doesn't have a new thread to give you, it will wait for half a second before it will start to increase its thread counts. So saving on threads can be important and help you to scale. And asynchronous I/O, both in Node.js and ASP.NET, is important. It is cross-platform, which I think is great, and you can use it on almost any operating system, and it is based on JavaScript. You all knew that, right? Because the first lecture I ever gave on Node.js, half of the people were disappointed that it's just JavaScript and just walk out of the room. And I think that the last thing that I want to say about Node.js is that as an open source platform, it has the most vibrant community around it. And you can see a lot of libraries and tools and environments just growing around Node.js rapidly. It's been the most rapidly growing environment in the past year as far as open source environment go. And that's it. Do you want to talk about ASP.NET? These guys.
Yeah, they know ASP.NET, but I have one thing that can just beat all of your stuff. ASP.NET is C#. I win. Basically, who here likes JavaScript? Okay, that is not what I expected. I've actually been developing web applications, beginning with classical ASP and up until ASP.NET 4.5.1, and I still hate JavaScript. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
It is.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you. I told you that.
Yeah. But let's face it, ASP.NET is a very robust framework. We have ways to create web applications. We have ways to create web services. Okay, I'm not talking about the ASMX web services, which is a piece of you know what. I'm talking about web API, for example. We have the ability to use asynchronous operations because the basic concept in Windows, those IO completion ports, are also being used in ASP.NET development, in .NET development, whenever you use the async and await, okay? Or even if you use tasks. How many people here are using .NET 4.5 with async and await? That's great, right? I mean, instead of using the begin invoke and end invoke functions.
I want to say something. Even if you're not going to use Node.js ever,